Hello, and welcome to another episode of the American Man podcast. I'm Isaiah Ritchie, and today I am joined by my son Elijah. And I thought it would be fun and interesting to go through the Bill of Rights together, just part of his history lesson and learning. And sometimes it's good to go back for myself too and revisit these. So we haven't done any in-depth studying, so a lot of this is just going to be off the top of my head and answering any questions that he has, and maybe we'll do follow up later if there's anything that we need to cover. Elijah, what do you know about the Constitution?
Well, I memorized the We the People part.
The We the People part, the preamble, right?
Yeah.
And what was the purpose of the preamble?
What is this is for and about?
Yep. So preamble says this is why we're making a constitution. So what had just happened when they were writing the Constitution?
Is the Revolutionary War.
Right, Revolutionary War. So we win the war, we kick out England, we say we're going to govern ourselves, and it starts as just a bunch of states, right? And the states get along, they're all on the same team, but they have different rules. They all have their own laws, they all have their own forms of currency and trade and things like that. And so things start getting a little messy. They start arguing. And so some of the founders, what we would refer to as the founding fathers today, get together and they say, hey, we have to be stronger. We are on the verge of breaking apart. And if we don't join together, if we're not united, then England could go back. England could come back. We're not as strong as we are. Things like that. So they get together, and what we take for granted today as the Declaration of Independence was not something that everyone agreed on. In fact, there are books now that were written at the time in the form of essays. One party or one group was actually against the Constitution and what we call federalism. Federalism is the central federal government. And there were the Federalists, the Anti-Federalists, and they all wrote these papers and things like that. And it wasn't automatic. Everyone was not on board at the beginning. So it took a lot of persuasion, a lot of debate, and things got left out, things got put in to the Constitution, and eventually it was ratified by the states. But part of the agreement, part of what they did when they passed or when they ratified the Constitution was they immediately agreed on the first 10 amendments. And that's what we call today the Bill of Rights. Okay. So, with that as the context, and I think context is important, we're going to go through those and we're going to discuss them. And tonight we're going to start with the First Amendment. And it's the First Amendment for a reason. So, Elijah, why don't you go ahead and read Amendment number 1?
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Prohibiting.
Prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition government for redress of grievances.
Great. So let's go through this. And I think this is going to be really interesting because, Elijah, how much do we talk about, actual laws? Like, have we ever gone through this before? The Bill of Rights?
No.
No. So it's almost like you're looking at this fresh. But I would say that we do talk about the world and current events and politics, quite often in our house, right? So I'm interested to hear what, your impression of what does this mean? And one reason I'm asking that is because a lot of arguments come up these days about what does the First Amendment mean? What rights does it actually grant us? Or Amendment number 2, 4, 5. We skip 3 most of the time because that's not really a big deal anymore. But So it'd be interesting to see how you interpret it, because there's a lot of argument about how would people, when these were ratified, when these were passed, how would people interpret them? So I'm just going to ask you. So what does it mean to you if it says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion?
That, like, Congress can't favor a certain religion and, like, force it almost or something like that.
Absolutely. Perfect. Perfect. So this is the Establishment Clause, is what they call it. And one thing that people often bring up is they argue that the founding fathers believed in the separation of church and state. That's not actually in here. The Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, none of those actually say separation of church and state. That was something that was in a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to a church. I believe it was the Danbury Baptist Church, something like that. And they had written him a letter saying, hey, Mr. Jefferson, we are concerned that the federal government might establish a national religion, be it Catholic or Baptist or Methodist or Presbyterian or something like that. And so Thomas Jefferson was writing back to them and basically saying, I believe that the Constitution supports a separation between the church and the government, church and state. Now, I personally believe that that's been taken too far, but let's dig into this a little more. Okay, so the government can't favor a religion. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean that the government can't say anything about religion in your mind, if you're reading that? When it says establish.
Well, I don't think they should make a law that you have to be this.
Yep.
That's for sure.
Perfect. Perfect. Now, what about the next part? It says, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
I don't exactly know the word prohibiting.
Prohibiting means like banning or preventing someone from exercising their religion.
Well, they shouldn't stop someone from trying to, like, pray or something.
Right. And it goes along, a little bit further than that. It's there's certain things that different religions believe, and the government can't enact laws that force us to go against what we believe, as long as those things don't affect other people. So there's a lot of debate about how far that can go. And for example, can a courthouse have a copy of the Ten Commandments hanging in the courtroom? Some people argue that is the government favoring a religion. What would you think about that?
Well, the Ten Commandments are good, and some of them do abide to the law.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's wrong to do that.
Okay. What if it was let's go. Well, the Ten Commandments are Jewish and Christian. What if it was a Buddhist saying or prayer or something like that, hanging in a government building somewhere on the wall?
It's a little bit deeper.
A little bit deeper, huh? Would you care?
Well, in our religion, obviously, it's not right.
Sure, it's not something that we believe, but do you
But
think it's wrong for, let's just say the city hall, in our local town, if someone there were to say, I'd like to hang, this prayer, this Buddhist prayer on the wall because I think it's nice. What do you think of that?
a little bit hard.
It's a little bit hard.
I mean, I guess they would think differently than us.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Would you feel like that was the government establishing a religion?
like, trying to make more people believe it?
Yeah.
I don't exactly think so.
Okay. And that's really one of the debates that we have today. There's a lot of people who believe that by having the Ten Commandments in a classroom, that is the government endorsing a religion, or by having a Buddhist, saying or prayer on the wall of a government building, that is the government endorsing a religion. My personal belief is that I do believe that we were founded on Christian principles and values, and that the founding fathers would have no problem with that. And, in fact, you can see that in their writings. But there's a difference in my mind between the government displaying something, some building, some worker, some employee, the mayor of a town displaying something, versus actually establishing a religion. I think that people, they take it too far. They interpret things as establishing a religion when it doesn't really establish it. It just might not be something that we agree with, and someone else does, and they hang it up on a
So
wall.
I think if someone wants to put the Ten Commandments up on the wall or something,
Mm-hmm.
that's not establishing it,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not telling anyone oh, you should definitely do this because all of other stuff is wrong.
Right. Right. You're not forcing, or if you put a Buddhist prayer on the wall, you're not forcing them to pray that prayer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's kind of how I feel about it. And I think that a lot of people, they get to they read the establishment part, and they don't get to the next sentence, which is prohibiting the free exercise thereof. In other words, if I work for the government, I should be allowed to express my religious beliefs. And I don't think the government should tell me that I'm not allowed to hang the Ten Commandments in my office or where I'm working or something like that. Or if I'm a teacher, I don't think the government should be allowed to tell me I'm not allowed to, um, hang up a copy of something that I believe in. So there's a tension between those two rights, isn't there? Especially for government employees.
Well, I don't think they should stop you from putting the Ten Commandments on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
That's not bad. It's just doing something that you want to do.
Mm-hmm. So let's say I was a teacher. Would you say that it would be okay for me to put the Ten Commandments on the wall of my classroom, but it wouldn't be okay for me to force all of the students to say a Christian prayer every day?
I don't think it would be very good to force them
Right.
to do Christian prayer every
Right.
day or something like that.
And I think that's the key here, with the First Amendment, with the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause, is the government can't force us to partake in a religion, but at the same time, I don't believe this prohibits the government from expressing a belief, and government employees from expressing a belief. It's just a question of whether or not that belief can be forced on other people, and things like that. So that's the religion part of the First Amendment. And again, we're looking at why were these enacted? What had just happened?
The Revolutionary War.
Revolutionary War, right. And one of the major reasons why a lot of people came to the United States before it was the United States was to escape religious prosecution.
King James forced.
Not King James, it was King George.
King George, okay.
Yeah. And, there's the Church of England and that whole history and things like that. And people, the Protestant.
So King George was forcing them to believe something.
Some people, and I'm not a expert on history, in terms of that King George was, but I know that there was, back and forth with, Queen, was it Bloody Mary and Queen Elizabeth, and they went back from Catholic to Protestant to Catholic to Protestant. Church of England, King Henry started Church of England, and they split from the Catholic Church, and then all kinds of things back and forth. But the point of this what I want you to understand is there's a reason why this was the First Amendment, and the first part of the First Amendment was, look, the government cannot force us to believe a certain religion, and it cannot stop us from exercising our faith. And that's, I think, important to keep in mind. If you were writing a list, like a Christmas list, what do you put at the very top? The thing that you want the most, right?
Rocket engines.
Rocket engines, right? So you put the thing that you want the very most up at top, and then you go from there. So, the founding fathers, they were very intentional when they made that First Amendment, number one, very beginning, first part of the First Amendment cannot create and establish a religion, and they cannot stop us from following our religion faithfully. So that's the first part. So what's the next sentence here?
Or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press.
Yep. So do you know what the press is?
Money printing?
Close. Printing something. Newspapers.
Oh.
Right? Books and things like that. Okay. So the press. So again, the freedom of speech and the freedom of press. Again, these are the things that were right at the top of the founding fathers' minds when they were doing the Bill of Rights, because under the king, you couldn't just say what you wanted. You couldn't just print what you wanted. You could get thrown in jail if you printed a book or a letter or a pamphlet or something that was critical or insulting to the king or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I read about some people that were killed for being Protestants.
Mm-hmm.
And it was under the reign of Bloody Mary or something.
Mm-hmm.
And they got killed for it.
Yep. And so that's why we have the Establishment Clause, and now we have the freedom of speech. So when you hear the freedom of speech, what does that mean to you?
You're allowed to say, "I hate Trump."
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And you won't get thrown in jail.
Right, and you won't get thrown in jail. And you're allowed to express opinions that people don't agree with, and the government can't do anything. And I want you to remember this. This is really important. The freedom of speech, all of these different rights, they apply to the government. These are things that the government can't do. And that's important because let's say I own a business and someone comes in and starts saying, "I hate Trump," and I disagree with them, and I want them to leave my business, or maybe I don't want to hire them for a job, or I don't want to do work for them. Do you think that this forces a private business owner to do those things?
Do you mean
So should I have to, work for someone who says terrible things that I disagree with? Should I have to work for them?
You don't have to work for them if
right.
you don't want
to. Or should I have to hire someone if I disagree with things they say?
I don't think you should fire them unless they don't do something right in their job or something. Should.
Well, that would be ideal, right? That would be a question of my judgment and integrity and things like that.
If they're working well,
mm-hmm.
then I don't think you should fire them just for their beliefs.
I agree with you on a principled matter. The bigger question is, though, that this is, I'm trying to get to here is, should it be illegal for me to fire someone just because I disagree with them?
Okay.
If I'm a private business owner, I'm
mm-hmm.
not the government,
mm-hmm.
I'm just me.
You shouldn't be allowed to.
Should it be illegal for me to fire someone?
That's another hard one. Well, I don't think
should the government punish me if I fire someone because I don't agree with them? I don't like working with them because I don't agree with the things they say.
I don't really think so. I mean, okay. I think
maybe I
There
would
may
be
be some
maybe
circumstances.
maybe I'm a bad boss, right? It might not be the right thing to do,
Hmm.
but I don't think that the government should punish me
I don't think they
for
should force you to hire a person or fire or force you to not fire a person just because of your different beliefs.
right, right. So the big distinction here is that the government cannot prohibit my freedom of speech. The government can't come in and say you're not allowed to, sing that worship song in public, or the government is not allowed to say you're not allowed to publish that book. That's critical or mean to the government or someone that they I don't like.
Well, if you're singing a song, I don't think there's any rule about freedom of singing.
So the freedom of speech and the freedom of press were very important, again, because they had just fought a war that was partially the result of, we don't want to live in a country or being controlled by a king where if you say something wrong about the king, they can throw you in jail,
Or
right?
kill you.
Or kill you. So that's why this was so important and why they put this way up at the top.
Hmm.
The next part, the right of people peaceably to assemble. What does that mean to you? This one's a little more complicated.
The right of people to peaceably assemble. Does it mean like people who totally disagree with each other are able to be together?
Not quite. So, what this means, and a little context is important here. Before the Revolutionary War, there were certain laws when England or when the king thought that people maybe were a little upset and maybe they were getting together to talk about how they can overthrow the king or how upset they were. They would pass laws that said no more than 3 people are allowed to be at a house at any given time, or no more than, or you're not allowed to gather together in a big crowd to protest something or to disagree or to meet and talk about something. So this was a response to those laws before the Revolutionary War, where, what the founding fathers are saying here is you have the right to gather together with as many people as you want to express your opinions. Again, the First Amendment is all about your right to express yourself without the government interfering. So this means that, let's say that there is a protest, let's just say anti-abortion. Okay, let's say there's a group of people and they say we don't like abortion. We want to all gather together and hold up signs that say, we don't like abortion.
Okay, I'm not going to go in that
There's
route because I might get
there's
shot by a paintball gun, but I agree
the
with
point
that.
but the point is the government can't make a law that prohibits that. Or on the flip side, let's say there's a group of people that say we don't like Trump. We want to all get together and hold up signs that say, we
Fire
don't,
Trump.
fire Trump, right?
Impeach him.
And so the government can't create a law that says, you're not allowed to gather together to criticize the government, or you're not allowed to gather together to criticize, this or that.
Is that what the government did do under the reign
That's
of
what the
King
king.
George?
Yes, that's what the king. That's there again. There were laws that said you're not allowed to have more than 3 people at a residence unless they're family members. They had laws that they put in place because they knew people were gathering together, and because they were unhappy. Right. There were these laws that would prevent that. Okay, and then this last part, to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
Okay.
There's a sentence for you. What do you think that means?
Petition. What does that mean?
A petition is when you get like a bunch of people together and there's a document that they sign that says, we want you to do this thing. or we don't want you to do this thing. For example, let's say they're building a new
Law firm building.
no, not usually that. Let's say they're building a new landfill, and a dump, right? And people around that place don't want the government to do it. They don't want the government to take the land to do it. So they could all get together and sign, call it a petition, and take it to the government and say, we don't want you to do that.
So should they be able to sign a document, give it to the government, and that will stop building the dump or something?
So yeah, this part of Amendment Number 1 was, I think, one of those things the founding fathers, they thought it was a good idea at the time, but it was probably important to them. But the way we established our government with Congress and the president and the judiciary, it doesn't really come up that much anymore. So what this is saying is, yes, you're allowed to get together, gather a bunch of signatures, and say, we don't want you to do this thing. The government doesn't have to listen to that petition. They're still the government. They're still the ones in charge. So it doesn't really have a legally binding effect. But again, it was important for the founding fathers to say we should all be allowed to get together and express our dissatisfaction with whatever it is that's going on, that we want to be able to present this to the government. Because again, let's say there was a bunch of people who signed a petition to King George saying, stop taxing us. They could take that petition and say, all these people on this petition should be arrested because they are trying to overthrow the king and they don't agree with them. So this was, again, another way to protect people from, expressing themselves and protecting them from that. So that's what this one was about. So that is the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. What are your thoughts after going through that?
Well, a question is, are we going to go through all of them different nights?
Yeah, we'll probably skip a few, or we'll put a couple together.
All right.
Yeah. So that was the First Amendment. And again, these are the types of things that, it's one little paragraph, quite the run-on sentence, actually. And a lot of court decisions have, hinged on that. For example, is it legal to burn the American flag as a form of protest?
That's a little hard.
Do you think it should be legal?
Well,
if someone doesn't like our country and they're here, should they be allowed to light the flag on fire?
Yeah.
I agree. Good job. I'm raising a libertarian. Yeah, it's a really touchy subject, and a lot of conservatives actually say that we should ban burning the flag. I don't agree with that. Now, I support the flag. I support our country. But I think what that flag stands for is you have the right to express your opinion. And there's some, I'm not going to get it perfectly, but there's a lot of good quotes out there that basically they say the freedom of speech only is only important, or when it's comes to something you disagree with, right? Like it's great to say, oh yeah, we have freedom of speech, but as soon as you hear something that you don't like, then you change your mind and say, well, that's not free speech. And we have a lot of laws in this country that I disagree with they're called hate speech laws or hate crimes. And they're based on, you're not allowed to say certain things that are offensive to certain groups of people, or, now the right, freedom of speech is not absolute. There are certain things, and one of the exceptions is fighting words. They're called fighting words. So you're not allowed to say something that will immediately result in violence, or you cannot make threats, that are, real, actual threats. It is not protected speech to say, I am going to go to my neighbor's house and kill him, right? That's not, you're not protected to say that, or telling a crowd, let's go over to my neighbor's house right now and kill him. Inciting violence, it's called. You're not allowed to do that. So just because we have the freedom of speech, it doesn't mean we're allowed to say everything. But we are allowed to have unpopular opinions. You can say some really terrible things, and in my opinion, you should be able to say almost anything that doesn't actually lead to violence, and not be punished for it. Now, again, this only applies to the government. So if you're on Twitter and you say something terrible and Twitter wants to block you, that's up to Twitter. That's I guess it's called X now, right? That's up to them, right? That is not, there's a lot of debate right now about that because X and Facebook, they're so widespread and such a source of information for so many people that people say, well, the freedom of speech should apply to that too. I still see them as private companies. I don't think that this necessarily should bind them, but I hope you have learned something, and I hope our listeners learn something too.
One more thing.
Okay.
This is probably the most complicated talk I've ever talked.
Well, if you can't walk the walk, then don't talk the talk. On that note,